How's it going, my fellow film buffs? You know who it is, Straight Shooter, here for episode 7 already for How I See It. Today I'm going to be talking about the movie, The Mule. Here we are again at Team Sound Studios, and like I said last time, it's going to be my shooting home for the foreseeable future. Big thanks again to them and the guy that runs it, my buddy. So as you know, as always, I'm going to be giving stuff away in this review about the movie, spoilers, talking about specific plot points, story arcs, all that stuff. Just forewarning you. So, The Mule. The movie stars Clint Eastwood and a bunch of other people that I didn't expect to see, like Diane West, who I remember from The Lost Boys and a lot of other movies, Bradley Cooper, Carlos Pena, 2 MCU actors. It's called The Mule because Clint Eastwood basically becomes a mule. The movie starts off with him falling out with his family because he was never able to help out. He's estranged from his wife, who's dying of cancer. He's estranged from his kids. And he has to find a job. He has an old beat-up pickup truck, and he doesn't know what to do. So someone gives him a card and says, hey, if you want to be paid to drive, call these people. And he's like, that's it. Just be paid to drive. And he's like, yeah. He's like, okay. He doesn't think anything of all the people that are there with guns and everything, giving him an inconspicuous package, saying all you got to do is drive this and you get buttloads of money. And he's like, okay. He does the drop and he gets the money. He's like, wow, that's a lot of money just for driving. He doesn't even think to say, okay, well, what is it that I'm carrying? The reason is because early on, one of the guys says to him, you don't want to know what's in the bag. And he's like, okay, but maybe I should know. And he's like, no, you don't want to know. And he starts off like that. He's totally ignorant of what's going on. And about the third drop or so, he finally says, you know what? Let me look in the bag. And of course, he sees all these drugs. That was the moment when he stopped becoming like the guy that's just trying to help out his family, trying to make some extra money, to the guy that knowingly becomes a drug mule. That's important for later in my review. So Clint Eastwood stars as the guy. I like the fact that it's realistic enough to say, okay, Clint Eastwood's, 80 now? I'm not even sure. They didn't make him out to be the badass that he used to be in the westerns and other movies where he beats everyone up. He's just an old guy, and he's just a driver. And it makes sense because that's the kind of role you might expect to see Clint Eastwood in. And it really speaks to how he makes good choices about the movies that he stars in. He knows what he would be capable of. And he knows what would work as far as what would make sense and what would be realistic. And in this movie, he's not interested in becoming a superhero or staying a superhero or whatever, however you want to look at it. He's just interested in being the kind of person that he could be. He plays the same role in just about every movie now. But it works because he's always the older guy who's talking down to the younger kids and saying, people of your generation, you don't know, and all this stuff. And everyone's like, all right, he's a kooky old man. But he also knows how to carry the performance to make it believable. And the movie wouldn't have worked without his performance. Because if it was just any other old guy in a role, it would be like, okay, whatever. But because it's Clint Eastwood, it works really well. So he finds out that he's actually being a drug mule. And he doesn't stop doing it. He continues. He does another drop and another drop, and he makes more money. And then he finally meets the cartel leader. And Clint Eastwood is invited to his home. There's a scene where he's partying with a bunch of young women, and he's this old guy, which probably does happen because the cartel does exist, and there probably are mules that don't look assuming and all that stuff, and they probably get treated really well, like Clint Eastwood was in the movie. It was kind of funny because in the scene there would be all these Latina hotties or whatever, and perfect figures and dancing salsa, and he's just and he's trying to dance, and he dances like this. It's kind of funny to see because he's kind of an old guy. He doesn't have the moves that he used to, but it's still kind of funny. In any case, so the movie goes on, and what happens is he disappears on a route because he finds out that his wife is in her deathbed. I mean, she had cancer, but she took a turn for the worse. So he goes and visits her, spends her last days with her, and they catch up with him. And the guys that catch up with him, they tell the leader his wife was dying with cancer. He had to see to her. There's the funeral. And he's like, I don't care. I want him dead. And instead of him getting dead, he gets caught. And in typical Clint Eastwood movie fashion, at least modern movie fashion of Clint Eastwood, it ends on kind of a sad note. It's kind of a bittersweet note, I would say, because his family recognizes that everything that he was doing was to help people, help the people in his community, help his family, try to give people in his life a future. But he sacrifices his future for it. He gets caught, and there's this funny moment earlier on between him and Bradley Cooper where they're talking, and Bradley Cooper has no idea who he is, and they're just having a conversation about their families and everything, and then they leave, and then the realization when Bradley Cooper stops him, says, get out of the car, and he turns around, and it's like, it's you. And he's like, yeah, it's me. And then they talk again about their families. Clint Eastwood is driven off in a police car, and then there's the trial, and you have this lawyer that was trying to fight for his case, and Clint Eastwood says, you know what, forget it. I'm guilty. He has nothing left except what he did over the course of however long it was throughout the movie. And he says, I have to pay for what I did because I did it knowingly. And like I said earlier on, if he had never looked in that bag, he would have never known that he was smuggling drugs. Even though the circumstances were kind of suspicious, he could have claimed ignorance if he never looked in the bag. But once he looked in that bag, he knew well and good what was happening. And you see him at the end of the movie in prison behind the fence, and he's tending to a garden because throughout the movie he talks about how he likes to raise flowers or whatever. And it's a bittersweet moment, but I like the fact that it's realistic. If someone in real life did this of his age, probably there would be only one of two options. He would either end up dead or he would end up in prison. Because you can't just keep running like that at the age you are and maybe one day retire from it and no one's going to say anything about what you did ever again. And I think the ending works. At the end of it, let me sum it all up. I thought it was a good movie. It was an unexpected movie that I didn't know that I would see, but thankfully my friend said, why don't we see this movie? And I was like, well, why not? So I ended up enjoying it. I thought it was a good drama. I wouldn't be surprised if it's up for some Academy Awards. If it was released on time, I don't know exactly how that works. But in any case, I like the movie. What score would I give it? I'd probably say about an A-. And the only reason why it's not A or A+ is because it's not really the typical type of movie that I would be excited to see or would go out of my way to see. It was a nice surprise, but I can't compare it to, like, say, Bumblebee or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse or some of the other blockbusters that I was excited to see. Like next week, I'm probably going to be reviewing Glass, which I'm very excited to see. Stay tuned for next week. And until then, I'll see you guys later. This is Straight Shooter, how I see it.